Welcome everyone to the first Coffee with Carol. This is the first in a series of conversations that I plan to have with learning leaders in different industries, in their industry. And in this case, we're going to be talking about the healthcare industry, including medical, pharmaceutical, biological, insurance, any of those kinds of things. And today's guest is Christine Keenan. But before we get to that, I want to tell you a little bit about our platform. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's Teams. But we want you to have the opportunity to speak up and join the conversation. So please stay muted until you're recognized to speak, but you are encouraged to speak. And you can use the hand raise, but I can't guarantee I'll see it. I'll try to see it. But luckily, I have some helpers who are on the call who will help me see it. And you can also use the chat to add comments and questions. And right now, it'd be really nice if you add in your location, state, country, whatever. I'm in Florida, obviously. I have flamingos behind me. And also your company or how you participate or what your interest is in this industry. And we think that would be interesting. And Chris also asked me to do that. So right now, I want to introduce well, let me introduce myself. I'm Carol Cohen, and I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Sales Enablement at Infopro Learning. And I do a lot of learning strategies, particularly in the healthcare industry and other industries as well. I'm doing one for a railroad company right now. I just did one for mining. Um, Today's guest is Chris Keenan, and we've worked together for several years. We started out working on a strategy. We really hit it off. She's brilliant. I could talk to her all day. That's the biggest risk of this session. She is a leader in the industry, in the healthcare industry, learning, and she is considered a model, a real expert to people who are in her realm. And I'm going to let her tell a little bit about herself. She is someone you really should be listening to and following. And that's why I'm thrilled to have her here. So Chris, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and add some details.
Hello. So, again, my name is Chris Keenan. I am a learning architect at the American College of Cardiology. I also lead our innovation design team, where we design, develop, implement, and evaluate across our education portfolio. I have a clinical background in cardiovascular ICU. I am a self-proclaimed learning scientist nerd. I believe deeply, as you hopefully will hear, and passionate about learning theory, learning science, and I truly believe, which we hope we will bring to life today, that learning science and learning theory with a dash of AI can probably solve just about any problem you have. So I'm super excited to be here, and it's very important to me and Carol to help you solve one little problem that you might be experiencing right now. So Carol is the true learning titan between the two of us, and we're here to help.
So thank you so much. And as I said, we could talk all day, the two of us. I just told her before we started this that I never leave a conversation with her without some nugget that's going to inspire me to do something different or new the next time. So I hope that happens for you as well. So today we're focusing on the healthcare industry. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but that is the context of our conversation today. And I plan to structure these conversations following my own formula, but I want them to be perceived as a conversation rather than a presentation. And one that, as Chris said, will really help you solve even a small problem that you have today that you want to be thinking about. Um, so uh, I just have a little definition here of what we mean by the healthcare industry and just a little a tip about how we're going to run these. I plan to run these like quarterly. I've already scheduled a representative of the learning department at J&J to speak with me in November. And so that's going to be exciting as well. But let's move on to the formula that will form the basis of this conversation. For some reason, Chris bounced down to a different monitor there. Sorry. Where did my slides go? Where did my slides go? There we go. Okay, so our formula, this is a formula I woke up, it just woke me up in the middle of the night and I was like, I must have found this somewhere. I didn't. I've searched everywhere. I think I thought it up. So here's the formula. A+B+C equals D. Audience first, and we always should be thinking about our audience before we think about anything else, defining that learner persona. B is for behavior and business goals, and you might be thinking healthcare, business goals. What are we talking about? We'll get to that. C is for content and also context, the context of that content, and all that together equals design excellence. So we're going to use this formula as the sort of structure of our conversation, beginning with audience. And I'm particularly interested in any kind of mythology around learners, because a lot of times we have mythology and we act on it. My first rule of everything is don't guess. Study to understand, talk to people, learn the real authentic view of your audience. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk to us about the learners that she works with in the healthcare industry. And I've put a quote on every page to serve as some kind of little mind candy for you to think about. But we really want to talk about that audience and the people that are in your learner groups. Sometimes you have more than one, sometimes you have one. But there's more to learning than just knowing stuff. And so, Chris, why don't you get started and talk about the audience, your audience?
Yeah, so I want to, being in a medical society, so American College of Cardiology, we have about 65,000 members worldwide with global chapters all across the globe. And while we certainly think about supporting our members, predominantly physicians, and I'll apologize in advance if I slip into a physician-centric learner model. I try really hard not to do that anymore. But because most of the education that the ACC produces is complimentary and free, we tend to think, we've done a good job democratizing what we have, what we produce. The first thing I'd like to do is dispel a little bit of a myth. If you think about a healthcare professional, when I say that, a pharmacist, a social worker, a nurse practitioner, a physician, anybody who might be licensed. These are men and women who are motivated to learn throughout their life. I am blessed to having a learning customer that recognizes that lifelong learning is required to do their job. So I am blessed in the healthcare industry to have an intrinsically motivated learner right from the get-go. And so that's one thing I think about. I also don't have a mandatory learner. I'm in the professional development space. I'm not, yes, we produce education that medical students or residents, physician residents, or physicians in training, nurses in training could consume. They're not necessarily my target audience. So I like to sometimes say, I don't really design towards a mandatory learner. I can't tell anybody to take anything, which really amplifies my me and my team having to really think about intrinsic motivation, engagement, how to help people engage in the learning that we offer. So that's the mindset that I have. Most of the principles that Carol and I will talk about today certainly translate across industries. I mean, the human brain is the human brain.
Right.
Doesn't change regardless of what you do for a living. But I am blessed with having an intrinsically motivated lifelong learner.
That's interesting. Um, but a busy learner
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
a super smart learner,
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of a God complex associated with doctors and stuff. Um, and we were talking a little bit about the mythology that, oh, they must want little nuggets of information that they accessed in the line at Starbucks. I always say I don't want my surgeon to learn how to take out my gallbladder in the car while he's watching a video on his phone.
Mm-hmm.
So what's some of that sort of mistaken kind of profile that I know a lot of I'm almost to the point where I'd say I'm kind of against micro learning, just because micro learning feels like ads on TV that we speed through. That it's really just an interruption to me. You have to convince me at this point today. This is my thing today. But so what? Talk a little bit about that, because I know you've heard about that kind of mythology around them.
Right. And so actually because of Infopro, we've gotten better data around time and learning in our educational products. In the United States, we have data that most physicians, most nurse practitioners and physician assistants learn through their desktop, right? That if they sit down to try to learn something, number one, they're doing it through their computer, laptop, desktop. And number two, they expect to spend about an hour. I think that just like anybody, if you're a designer out there, hopefully I'm preaching to the choir here. Um, Micro learning, just in time learning, I like to think of it a point of care learning, is information that you need at a moment in time that serves a very specific purpose. If you happen, so none of us are learning something in 10 minutes or less. Now, we might we might learn how to cook something, or we might learn something on YouTube, but in order for that to get sticky, we probably have to go back to it and find that reliable source, that one person that we know, oh gosh, who taught me how to cook X, Y, and Z. And those are our human brains. So from micro learning standpoint, Carol is correct. Are people consuming podcasts? Yes. Are people going to Up to Date, which is an app in the healthcare professions? Probably most of you know about it, to feel like they're getting micro doses of science to help them keep up to date? Yes. Are people changing practice based on a 10-minute podcast from, I don't know, Kim Eagle, who's one of the best cardiologists out of the University of Michigan? I hope not. I hope it is a first step in problem solving, and Dr. Eagle may have shared a recent article, and then they're going to look at that recent article just
Right.
like us, right?
Right.
Um, the other thing, we know how our learner in healthcare, we know how our learners learn because that's what they've been doing their whole lives. They'll probably go to PubMed first. They'll look for the Sentinel article or the article that helps them solve that problem. They'll maybe look at the reference in the jump. They'll read the article, they'll look at the reference, they'll jump to the next article. They might spend a little bit more time troubleshooting, and then they'll phone a friend. So we also know that as well. Their trusted source for learning is research, and PubMed is their trusted first stop. That helps everybody. I'm
Well,
curious
it does.
if
It
anybody
does.
thinks, if anybody wants to push back
Chime
on that notion,
chime
Carol.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I think it demonstrates that you really do understand your audience. And, I learned a long time ago that you just have to start with understanding the audience. As much as all the pressure in the world is trying to get you to start somewhere else, like the content, um, the audience is your starting point. And really, anybody who wants to chime in on audience, raise your hand. We'd love to have you talk. I don't see any hands, so I'll just give you the sense that. So here's a question. Is research the main type of learning for midwives and nurses too, in your experience?
Yes, it's all the same. It's all the same human brain, the midwife or the nurse. Um, Let me reframe. Midwife for sure is they have a a mastered level looking at PubMed to solve their problem. Is a bedside nurse who's trying to solve a problem going to look at PubMed? Hopefully they have a job aid or a tool or a reliable source in the moment of need, maybe their electronic medical record, someplace that they can go to help solve that problem at the point of care. I know Carol and I love Bob Mosher's, even though it's very hard to understand 5 moments of need. What we really need to help our healthcare providers who are in the moment of care be able to have that second brain, their phone. I call your phone your second brain, and be able to find that reliable source. First click into the source, second click into the tool, the resource, the reminder you need to solve that problem. That's true of any industry, though. That can
Yeah.
be an electrician, a plumber. You first of all, you need to know where to find the resource that's going to help you solve that problem. And then the next thing you have to do is find it easily, 2 clicks away.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think if we can back up from this a little bit, what you're talking about is the context of that audience
Mhm.
and understanding the context that they work and live in. And you'll find that in some cases, like I do a lot of sales training, the salesman has quite a different context than that educated, not that they're not educated, but the extended education of the medical worker, from doctor to whatever, that sort of research science-based context is where you need to insert your training and where you need to say learning plays a part in this context and sort of insinuate yourself in there. I think it's very interesting. I'm going to move us on
Sure.
to behavior goals. Um, and just because, that's the B in A+B+C=D. So let's take a look at this. I know someone on here said that their role is specifically collaborating with healthcare providers to enhance their business goals. Interesting, as a consultant. So this should resonate with you. But we're going to talk about what are the appropriate metrics for the learning that you developed, Chris.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to go off camera. So because I am my team and I are these big learning nerds right now. We have this North Star, and the North Star is simply the 8 adult learning principles. Right now, if you want to help any professional in any professional development in a behavior change, in my opinion, you have to hit relevancy. It's relevant to what they do or want to do, and it has to help them solve a problem. Now, active learning used to be at the top of the pyramid for us here at the ACC. I used to say to the design team, it has to be interactive. Yes, it has to be interactive, but we're finding more and more and more is relevance and problem solving is more important. And relevance and problem solving, in my opinion, is because we are all being served curated content all the time. So I don't know how many people are on TikTok. I don't know what everybody feels about TikTok, but as a designer, TikTok has changed how I think about education since I began it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever I got on it. And so when you're thinking about what behavior, what you need someone to do, you have to think about is what I want to teach, what they want to learn. And sometimes that value proposition is a little bit tricky, particularly if you're in a business industry that you might have to teach someone, that you want to teach someone something about a new product that might not help them be better at what they do. That's my personal goal. I want to help you be better at what you do. Doesn't matter if it's your job or taking care of your kids when you leave this hour today. I just want to help you be a little bit better than what you thought you could do before, right? So I think right now, I don't know about you, Carol. I think we have to hit relevance is what you want to teach, what they want to learn.
Right.
And that's really hard, y'all, because sometimes what they want to learn is not what you need to teach because they're still not doing something right. That happens to me all the time here at the ACC. And is it going to help them solve the problem? And if you can hit that problem solving for them, just like me in the beginning of this, hey, I'm trying to offer you some nuggets. I'm trying to fold you in to say, listen to Carol and I, right? We're going to give you some nuggets to help you be better at what you do and help you problem solve. Relevancy is one of the first things I think you can really start amplifying.
And I think one thing I want to add to that has to do with our old friend Kirkpatrick,
Hmm.
which, I've struggled with for decades, right? Um, decades looking at level 3 and level 4, like thinking you got to do an autopsy on a person to figure out if they've actually achieved, level 4. And then something hit me that no, not really. We have to think about it before we start our programs, and we have to think of it at a program level. So if we work for a company, that company probably has business goals and metrics they're measuring now. And somewhere along the line, there are metrics that you in training can influence. And what are those metrics? Are they measuring, you know, everything from the patient or customer survey all the way to retention or workplace satisfaction or any kind of business goal, time to some kind of thing, proficiency for new employees, any of those things become drivers for what you're trying to do in terms of how you determine what to build and how you measure that success. And we have to be daring enough to say, I can affect the satisfaction survey. I can affect time to proficiency for new hires, or I can affect um, whatever bottom line the business is trying to achieve, and also ask what does the company or organization want people to do, say, show, find differently than they do now, and set those as your metrics at the front end. And so when you map that to the relevancy that Chris was talking about, where, does it really matter to their day-to-day problem solving? It does, because they're in the context of that organization. And all you have to do is sort of map it. Then your your company or organization is actually measuring most of that for you. They already measure it. You just asked them what they already measure now. Some things you influence by asking them to measure other things, right? And then some things you measure yourself. But when you're looking at that business and behavioral side, some of it is observing what they do. Are they doing something differently that you want them to do? And are people seeing that happen? And you have to get a little creative about how you measure that. But I think those are the things we should be thinking about in 2024 and not get so wrapped around how many users we have and what's their engagement, that sort of thing. Like, that's all good. We do that perfectly. But let's really focus on what those goals are for behavior and business.
Yeah, and Carol, if I could chime in on one notion, I want to call us, everybody on the call, a little bit to task. If you're hearing or you're experiencing click-through education, that's no one's fault but the designer. If you can impact learning outcomes, change, motivation, engagement, inspiration, joy in learning. But you have to design a classroom you want to be in. You have to design an online module that you want to run home to your SO, your significant other, or you can't wait to tell somebody about. And I promise you, if you design education that you're excited about, it has to be very personal, you all. Very personal. I have yet to have that concept kind of let me down. If you think it's fun, then somebody else is probably going to think it's fun. And, you know, again, I am Infopro. Carol has taught me a lot in my career. I'll just tell you all that. She helped me design the most successful education that we've ever done at the ACC. 9.5 hours of online education. And each online module, we wanted to be like a little treasure box, like Netflix, right? Because we know adults have an unlimited attention span. Remember, adults have an unlimited attention span. Otherwise, we wouldn't stay up watching Netflix. Well, we used to, but now it's not as good as it used to be for, you know, days on end. So that notion of being excited to learn online, we actually achieved with people from all over the world that said, I've never felt so inspired after taking this education. And the things that we did to get those behavior changes didn't cost a ton of money, but boy, did it take some good intentional design, some mindfulness of relevancy. How can I help? I made it sound so personal then, right? How can I help these providers do better at taking care of this complicated heart failure disease called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy? You impact that. And you want to say to yourself, no, I don't. I can't do all that. No one's talking design with you, you all, except Carol and I. No one cares if you use design thinking, if you use Addy,
Right.
if you use the 5 moments of need. There's some, maybe you got a great learning friend out there somewhere who will tolerate this conversations beside Carol and I who love to talk about it. But
Right.
otherwise, no one's challenging you with what color and font and what sound you might have in the game. Nobody. It's all personal. You have the power. And if you're designing, and I apologize if anybody on the call does HIPAA education, maybe you don't even know what HIPAA education is. It's or like cybersecurity. Why is cybersecurity education so boring? Like how to make sure I don't know. I go, I always think,
Right.
gosh, they need a good designer.
Well,
Could you
they need context, you know. I always say it's context. And in the case of healthcare, in your case of you know, the cardiology, it's life and death. I mean, we're
this is
smiling and
true.
we're having fun, but you need
This
to
is true.
recognize this is life and death training.
This is true.
And it matters. It matters. We're
It
getting some
does.
excitement in our chat, but I'm too excited for content because I want you to tell about your escape room. The
Mm.
third wing of the academy here is the content. And I don't just mean, and I've got a pile of books here, I don't just mean the facts. I mean the context of the content. I also mean the life cycle of the content. There are some content that can live forever. There is some content that can live for 5 minutes because it's going to change. And we in training have to think about that. We don't pile it all into one complicated gamified e-learning that takes months to crack open and update. We have to think about that. And for a long time, I have to tell you, for I don't know, not 10 years, maybe 6 years, I have wanted to do an escape room as a model for sales training. Um, at a sales training event, you know, the sales guys, they always have their annual event, their kickoff, and I've wanted to do this. Well, apparently Chris has done it for literally thousands of people. And I really want her to talk about that. And then I want to open up for a couple of the people that are chiming in on chat for them to talk. But you're going to get really excited about this way of adapting content to the context of the learner, using their profile, understanding who they are, assigning metrics and goals that you want to have, and putting it all in a fun escape room model. How can that happen, Chris?
Wow. So the ACC just had its annual meeting in Atlanta. We took over the Atlanta Convention Center. And for anybody who's doing in-person education, I think in-person education, this isn't Chris Keenan. There's a trends report from the PCMA and Freeman. I think in-person education for professionals will do remarkably well for the next 3 or 4 years. I think people are hungry for formal and informal connections. I hate the word networking. And so I think in person will do well, whatever field you're in. And if you need any of the evidence to support that, let me know. So we had our annual meeting, 18,000 people in Atlanta, the most we've had in almost a decade, so way before the pandemic. And I am responsible for our hands-on learning pad. We have lots of spaces. We offer over 400 hours of education across all of these rooms that we have in the convention center, and I am responsible for kind of our hands-on space. And what we learned a couple of years ago is if you can hit relevance and problem solving, you can create hands-on learning stations pretty economically. And one of the things I was challenged with from the chairs, right? My education only comes from faculty members, physicians, nurse practitioners, pharmacists. I don't do any of the teaching in the space. I just design the space. And one of them challenged me to make an escape room. And when I first heard escape room, I like dropped my shoulders. I'm like, I just can't. I just can't. And he's like, you got to try. Anyway, so we did try. Literally, it was a square, I don't know, 10 by 10. It was a decent space with a door. And we created the escape room that was called the Cath Lab Conundrum team-based education challenge, because we really wanted to support team-based care, which is very hard to do in a physician-centric meeting, right? And so we created 3 puzzles in this escape room around a certain type of cath lab procedure. The first puzzle was on risk stratification for the procedure. The second puzzle was around shared decision making. And the third puzzle was on managing a complication. We had a small little debriefing area. And so the escape room was timed. You had 10 minutes to get through the escape room. It was an ad hoc team, right? It was people who came up and kind of signed in and said, here's the 3 people that I'm going to go through the escape room with. As people heard about the escape room, they kind of came with their teams of 3 to 5, and it came a little bit more of a competition that way. But if not, it was an ad hoc team. You had 10 minutes to go through. We did have a leaderboard. Now, when I say leaderboard, it was an Excel spreadsheet that we had on a laptop that we had displayed, and that person at the desk just kept moving the Excel spreadsheet. Just so everybody knows, you can Google leaderboard, escape room leaderboard in Excel, and templates come up. Super easy. Right. It was super exciting. The prizes were a badge ribbon that said we were the escape room winner team. You would have thought we gave them the best surprise. The cost of the escape room was $47, with the exception of the walls. Like, it did take, we did have to have a wall and a door, but the puzzles themselves. And the key to all of it were the faculty who pulled them through the relevancy of making sure they understood how to risk stratify, the key decisions and conversations you should be having with your patients, the resources that you have to do team-based care, how to manage a complication easily. It was successful for two reasons. We helped them solve a relevant problem. They had fun, and we had really good teachers. If you're going to do low fidelity hands-on learning, if you're going to do dry erase board stuff, if you're going to do on the fly kind of interactive, you got to have good teachers. Got to have good teachers. The context, we had 3,000 people come through our our 15 stations. And I keep telling the story that, sure, I was the producer and the director, and I made sure the stations were all ready to go, but without the actors and actresses, without the remarkable men and women who were committed to learning and teaching. Because of Carol, I called them my learning titans.
Amen.
And I had learning titan ribbons made for them. You would have thought they won, the biggest prize. They were the only ones who could have learning titan ribbons at our meeting if they, it was remarkable. And people were happy. So that was my goal. My goal was that the faculty left rejuvenated. Your teachers are one of your target audience as well. If your teachers are feeling that they're burdened by having to teach the training course, you got to fix it for them, y'all. Your students are never, your trainees are never going to be inspired if your teachers aren't inspired by what they're teaching. They're just not. And so I wanted my teachers to be happy, to feel the power that they had by teaching the medical students.
Right.
And they were happy. Your faculty have to be part of that group. You have to make sure that they're happy in what you've designed and that they can function at their best. And I know we can't control all of it. I know we can't. Sometimes they start doing a slide presentation. You're like, oh, this is not what we needed.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, well, you have to empower them because in even teaching school, like my daughter is now a high school teacher, you're just kind of like, you get kind of down, like, am I really making a difference? And the reality is we are making a huge difference. And I want to say something about this fun uh, experiment that you did with the escape room. That escape room that Chris just described was grounded in some serious intentional instructional design. This is not, like, we've all seen gamification that is a multiple choice test dressed up to look like a cartoon, just to be looking like a cartoon. This was grounded in that A+B+C=D model. It had a good understanding of who the people were who were going to be coming in there, what their learning style was like, what mattered to them, what kind of problems were important to them, where they needed to learn. It had the kind of goals and business and behavioral goals that allowed them to practice and work with each other. And Chris mentioned it, that they need to make shared decisions. There's a shared decision model that's part of their training, and it's hard for them. That goes back to that God complex. They like to be in charge individually, and now they have to make decisions as a group. They're practicing that in the context of this game. And then when you look at the content, you're putting the content in the context of a real problem that they get to noodle on, and they get to noodle on together and practice, and they will walk out of there with something that they've learned. And it's serious business, serious, exciting, wonderful business. And it empowers, and you can even tell, Chris skims over it, but she actually validated the instructors who were participating by giving them a ribbon. She validated the participants by saying, you got out, you escaped the escape room, you were the fastest, you were whatever, you were the best dressed. I can picture Chris validating them even if they took the longest of the team. And those things are important. They are important. And it really matters, and it turns into successful learning,
Yeah,
and
Carol, you bring up a good point about gamification. So there's lots of research we know now in gamification. It's not going to hold people's attention like we thought it could. There's intentional design about when to use it and when not. One of the times that where we like to use gamification, and often Infopro will help us do that, is when we need to create cognitive dissonance. They think they know how to do something when they really can't. That's when games are really helpful. I also like gamification when you have well-worn topics. So in healthcare, helping someone stop smoking, really important for a cardiologist or a CV professional to be able to help guide people through, motivational interviewing techniques to help people stop smoking. But behavior change is really hard. And so for topics that we find that learners might go, oh my God, I can't take another course in X, Y, and Z. That's where we really like to use gamification, because the game aspects uncovers what they don't know. And as soon as you've uncovered what they don't know, they'll lean in a little bit more. They hate not to know. They hate to
right.
get the wrong answer. Every human being hates to get the wrong answer. Um, and so that notion was part of it. Our meeting is pretty intense. There's late-breaking clinical trials that do change lives and can save lives, that are unbelievably important, that are announced each day. The education that is provided is very, very intense. So this hands-on space is really created that playscape. And if you're interested in the power of creating playscapes, both online and in person, there's lots of literature now about how we need these playscapes for kind of the cognitive dump, to help people with their cognitive overload, to let people drop their shoulders and kind of ride the swing sets, like it's the recess of our meeting, right? Um, and so I think that that's really important. Again, the PCMA has a remarkable document out about the next generation of learner. It's really about the in-person attendee, but the notion of play and fun and the science behind fun and learning is really powerful right now. So if anybody needs to know that. Carol, I see we only have 15 minutes left, and we're down to only
No,
13 people. So I'm wondering if
that's
we
okay.
can't just
We got excellent people on
right,
here,
but
and there's a question I want you to
yeah,
read while I move to the next slide. And I also want to add a word to what you just said, where you were saying play, and fun, and I think safe. I think we can't forget safety. There's a safety in that environment to practice and
correct.
fail that they don't have in real life. So I'm going to move on to design excellence just to get that on the screen. And Ivan put up a big question about research environment, and maybe you have some ideas to share about that, ways of learning. And I'm trying to encourage you to speak up and join our conversation, especially if you have something either to share or a problem that you're struggling with or a way that you resolved a problem. We'd love to hear that too. Um, Anything on Ivan's question, Chris?
Yeah, I think, Ivan, one of the big problems, if you're finding that you're producing education and you're disappointed in the level of engagement, is you have to remember, one, dissemination of education is really hard. You have to remember, I don't know, there's 25,000 journal articles or journals that are produced every month. And so I don't want anybody to believe that we have these amazing dissemination vehicles and we're able to impact care immediately because we're the ACC. In fact, research shows when a guideline, a healthcare guideline, is published in any field. I'll give you one that you may all know if you have kids. Several years ago, the the American Physicians Association, came out with back to sleep, right? Baby was on their belly for for sudden infant death syndrome. Now baby was on their back, and they started this back to sleep campaign. Now pacifiers are good. And so getting a guideline to get adopted takes 15 to 18 years still at the American College of Cardiology. And that's because a lot of people don't even know that a new guideline has been issued. So if you're finding that you're disappointed in the level of engagement in your education, Ivan, I would think first and foremost, are you getting traction in your target audience? Do you know who is going to be engaged in it? Who is it relevant to? Who are you helping solve a problem for? The preferred method, the format, kind of comes after when you decide who am I helping with this solution. If you have a solution set, if I'm reading your question right, if you have a solution set in the research environment, then you feel that your solution is solving a problem. And is that, I'm going to be a little personal here, Ivan, is that your problem that you're trying to solve? Or is that a learning problem that you found in your audience? Sometimes education can't even solve those problems. And we know that from all of the risk analysis that we have from hospitals and from To Err is Human, right? We learned that a long time ago that education can't solve every healthcare problem because of the Swiss cheese effect. So I'm happy, Ivan, I mean, happy to share my email, but it seems to me that you're passionate about your solution set, but you might have be having a disconnect between the solution set and actually connecting that relevant and that problem solving with those learners. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer, Chris. And um, as you were talking, I was also thinking that sometimes we lose track of how we can impact one person. We get
Mhm.
ourselves wrapped up in the old Kirkpatrick 1 and 2. You know, we've got to have 1,000 people took it and we got a score of 4.85. But the reality is it's that one person. It's the one person. And I look at it from my years of teaching high school back a million years ago and seeing my students today. They pop up occasionally. And and that they say, like, I had one student who now writes all these books about the ghost stories and folklores of different towns, and he's like a little historian that goes around and looks at a town and finds all their stories, and he writes a book about it. He posted a paper that I graded on Facebook and said, "This is why I'm writing books now." And of course, it was a paper that he'd written where I had written in red, and I was horrified to see what he was posting because I thought, "What did I possibly write?" And I had written, "Chris, this is excellent writing if you're writing an essay or a review, but this assignment was neither an essay nor a review." And that was my comment to him. But the reality is, apparently, something happened with him in my class that caused him to become an author. And when you think about that in terms of what you're doing, that's where the power is. The power is in one person. So as I see
I agree.
a relatively small number of people attending here, if we can impact even one person to inspire you, please, we consider that a success. And I think that that's the way that you have to look at your training as well. If you can make that connection for that individual to do something different, behave differently, feel confident in something that's new, you're doing, you're doing the magic, you're doing the work that is so important that we all can't live without. And I think that's the inspirational thing. So just quickly, I just want to throw up the takeaways that I think about. And it's not just empowering the learner, it's also empowering the participants, the instructor, any participant in the chain of learning, the instructor, even your leadership, empowering your leadership, make them the hero of the program. Empower them, ask why every time, use the 5 whys, really dig into why does this matter? Why is this important? Why are we doing this? Then customize to that context and make the choices for the long term, which is as you're doing the escape room, can I expand this escape room for 3,000 people to go through? Can I make it in a way that can scale? And then align to those measurable outcomes. I think that's what happens. So one last quote. I love Maya Angelou. I saw her speak in Boston. I was lucky enough to hear her speak live.
Oh.
I like this idea that we are all on a learning journey. We are all learning all the time, even as practitioners of learning. And that's why these conversations are so important. So let's hear from you, please. At least one. I have been fighting for this. I have 2 dreams in my life. One dream is that we can have webinars where the audience is allowed to speak. And the other is that I can go into a restaurant and I can order a Diet Coke and my friend can order a Diet Pepsi in the same restaurant. Those are my 2 dreams in life. And I think I've achieved one, which is you are enabled to speak. So I would really love it if at least one of you would chime in and talk about, if anything resonates or you need to challenge anything that we've been talking about, please. Someone, unmute yourself.
I think the other thing was like, did it meet expectations too? Like if you you were thinking it would be one thing and we didn't quite hit the relevancy, the irony, Carol, the irony.
I know we have a hand up. I don't really understand how to do it. Sylvie.
Yeah, my hand was up.
Hi.
I didn't know I had my hand up.
Oh, okay. But you're talking. You're talking on the webinar. My dream has come true. So
Yeah,
share. You've been putting questions and things up, please.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. It's not a lot of webinars I actually attend live for many different reasons, and I am sure that I actually did this. It's I have just connected with the both of you at the on LinkedIn, and to the both of you I wrote, I really seriously feel like we were in the same coffee house having a chat together, because every time I thought something, I had a question, one of you answered, and it just really felt like 3 nerds and all the others. I'm sure I felt the energy of everybody else. So
okay.
that is my largest takeaway, that I have learned a lot. I've got a lot of ideas for the fantastic work I'm doing with a fantastic obstetrician. And
lovely.
And we're gonna save some more lives just because babies' lives, newborns' lives, just because of all the ideas I've got for from you, and you also have helped me feel certainty around things that I wasn't really sure about. So big thank you to the both of you. And I'm hoping I'm going to see the recording because I do want to re-listen and fill in some more of the notes.
So Carol, I think Infopro needs to sponsor a learning nerd club on LinkedIn or something where we can just have a Carol's crew. Let's call it
Like
Carol's crew.
Yeah, right.
Carol's crew. And we
Carol's
can all
crew.
just start sharing because Sylvie, what I'm guessing is you're a remarkable designer. Because if you are, I would just guess it because you are on the path of really caring about that one person, that one obstetrician, that one person who's going to catch that baby differently, who's going to do that high risk, low probability procedure like shoulder dystocia. You're on your way. You're an intentional designer if you are inspired by us. Carol's crew, look, I would join. We've got a second one.
You do this to me all the time. Thank you so much, Sylvie, for those words, those kind words. It was my hope that this would be an inspiring thing. And that's the reason that I wanted to do it by industry, because I wanted a chance for the people that are often isolated, like you're the one learning person and we don't have any money for you to go to any conferences, so forget about that. And we wanted you to have a place where you could talk, we could talk freely about your audience and your situation.
And I would love to add, to what it helped me with is that I did feel that it was more streamlined, like just because you were all talking about in the area of healthcare, even if everything you have said was probably usable for mechanics or whatever, but healthcare, working with healthcare is, of course, is new for me. And it really helped me shut out a lot of noise, a lot of other ideas. With you all speaking about doctors and nurses and healthcare and everything, even if it wasn't obstetrician or midwives, it did help me keep my focus. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, I'm thrilled. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you to everyone. Super thank you to Chris. Like I said, I could talk to Chris all day long. I never leave a conversation with Chris without some kind of inspirational gold nugget to go do something with. Thank you for joining and sticking with the session. You can always go to LinkedIn and link up with me. If you want to have a call, we can get on a call. I'm happy to do that. I'm not happy to do it with a vendor who wants to sell me something, but I'll vet you a little bit for that. But I would definitely happy to talk about training anytime, day or night, anytime, anywhere. So thank you all very much. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.
Bye.